Businessman sees beggar girl feeding his disabled son, and it changes his life. Robert Anderson watched in shock from inside his Lexus as Jasmine, a girl of just 9 years old, shared her only sandwich with Ethan, a little blonde 2-year-old boy leaning on a walker. The businessman's heart nearly stopped when he recognized his own son, who was supposed to be under the care of Margaret, the nanny he paid an exorbitant salary to supervise the child. "My God, what's happening over there?" Robert murmured, to himself, adjusting his sunglasses to make sure he was seeing correctly. Just a few feet away, Margaret was chatting animatedly on her phone, completely unaware the boy had wandered off. Acting on impulse, Robert stepped out of the car, a mix of anger and worry surging through him. How had Ethan slipped away from supervision? And why was this barefoot girl, clearly from humble means, feeding his son? "Ethan!" Robert called, quickening his pace along the Venice Beach boardwalk. Hearing his father's voice, the little boy turned with a smile, but didn't let go of the walker or the piece of sandwich he held in his other hand. The girl, startled by the sudden approach of the suited man, immediately stood up. "Sorry, mister. I was just sharing my snack with him," Jasmine explained, her eyes downcast. "He asked for a bite when he saw me eating." Robert took a deep breath, trying to contain his frustration, not at the girl but at the situation. He slowed his approach and crouched to his son's level. "Are you okay, Ethan?" he asked, checking the boy from head to toe to make sure he was unharmed. Ethan grinned and held out the sandwich to his father. "Yummy, Daddy, Jazz gave." Robert looked at the girl, noticing her bare feet, faded jean shorts and plain white tank top. Her curly hair was tied in a messy bun, and despite her humble appearance, there was something dignified in her posture. "Thank you for looking after him," the businessman said, softening his tone. "But where is the—" He didn't finish his sentence because at that moment, Margaret finally noticed Ethan was missing and came running toward them. "Mr. Anderson," the nanny gasped, panic written all over her face. "I swear I only looked away for a second. He was right beside me and—" Robert raised a hand, cutting off her excuses. "We'll discuss this later, Margaret." Turning back to the girl who had already started to slip away, Robert called her back. "Wait, what's your name?" "Jasmine, sir," she replied, her politeness contrasting with her simple appearance. "Why are you out here alone, Jasmine? Where are your parents?" The girl hesitated before answering. "I live with my grandma nearby," she said, vaguely gesturing toward the hills not far from the beach. "Sometimes I come here to collect leftovers from the food stands to take home." Margaret, still trying to salvage her professional reputation, interjected. "Mr. Anderson, don't believe that story. Street kids always make up things to get money. She was probably trying to get close to Ethan so she could share her only sandwich with him." Robert cut in, giving the nanny a sharp look. "That's exactly what I saw happening while you were busy on the phone, Margaret." The nanny paled, realizing the gravity of the situation. Ethan, oblivious to the tension between the adults, still clutched his piece of sandwich and smiled at Jasmine. "Friend Jasmine," he said, pointing at her. Robert watched his son for a moment. Ethan rarely felt comfortable with strangers, especially since starting those painful physical therapy sessions to strengthen his legs. The doctor had explained that the boy's motor development was delayed due to a rare congenital condition, but with proper treatment, he had a good chance of eventually walking without the walker. "Jasmine, you said your grandma lives nearby?" asked Robert. The girl nodded, still wary. "On Maple Street, at the bottom of the hill." Robert took out his wallet and pulled out some bills. "Here is thanks for looking after my son." Jasmine looked at the money but didn't reach for it. "You don't have to, sir. I just shared my snack with him because he asked. It was nothing special." That refusal surprised the businessman. In his experience, people in vulnerable situations rarely turned down financial help. There was something different about that girl. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. "Margaret, take Ethan home," Robert ordered, putting the money away. "We'll talk about today later." The nanny, still nervous, took Ethan's free hand and tried to guide him, but the boy resisted. "No, stay with Jazz," he protested, clinging to his walker. "Ethan, son, we need to go," Robert said gently. "Maybe we can see Jasmine another day." Jasmine gave the boy a shy smile. "Go with your dad, Ethan. I have to get home to take care of my grandma anyway." Reluctantly, Ethan let Margaret lead him toward the car. Robert, however, didn't follow right away. Something about that girl intrigued him, something he couldn't explain. "Jasmine, is your grandma sick?" The girl nodded. "She has heart problems. I take care of her." "And your parents?" Jasmine's expression darkened. "I don't have parents anymore. It's just me and Grandma now." Robert felt a pang in his chest. How could such a young child care for a sick, elderly woman? Where were the social services? Where was the state? Where was people's humanity? "I work at the physical therapy clinic in the afternoons," Jasmine continued, pointing to a nearby building. "I mop the floors and help with whatever they need. That's how I got Grandma's medicine last month." Robert followed her gaze and recognized the Johnson Rehabilitation Center, the same place where Ethan had his therapy sessions 3 times a week. A coincidence that seemed to mean something. "You work there, but you're just a child." Jasmine shrugged as if it were no big deal. "Lots of people start working young, sir. At least there they treat me well and let me work only after school." "You go to school?" "Yes, in the mornings. I never miss a day," she replied with obvious pride. "Grandma always says education is the only way for us to have a better life." As they talked, Margaret had already buckled Ethan into the car and was impatiently watching her employer. Robert checked his watch and realized he needed to go, but something kept him from simply walking away. "Jasmine, I'd really like to talk more with you." He pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to her. "This is my card. If you need anything at all, you can call me." The girl took the card carefully, as if it were something precious. "Thank you, sir, but I don't think I'll need to." "Robert. My name is Robert Anderson." "Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I have to go now. Grandma's waiting." As he watched Jasmine walk away, Robert couldn't stop thinking about the dignity with which that child carried responsibilities that would be overwhelming even for an adult. He slowly walked to the car where Margaret waited with a worried look. "Mr. Anderson, I can explain what happened. That girl approached Ethan and—" "That's enough, Margaret," Robert cut in, getting into the vehicle. "I saw what happened. With my own eyes. You were on the phone, completely distracted, while my 2-year-old son who relies on a walker wandered alone on the boardwalk." "But, sir, that girl could be dangerous. Street kids are often trained to share the only food they have with a stranger's child," Robert interrupted sarcastically. "Margaret, your services won't be needed anymore. I'll pay what I owe you by the end of the month, but I don't want you caring for my son again." The nanny paled. "You can't be serious. I've worked for your family for 6 months, and this was just a small mistake." "A small mistake that could have cost dearly," Robert replied, starting the car. "Ethan is a vulnerable child. You know that. He needs constant attention, not someone who'd rather gossip on the phone than do her job." In the back seat, strapped into his car seat, Ethan happily played with the piece of sandwich Jasmine had given him, completely unaware of the tension between his father and the nanny. When they arrived home, a mansion in Beverly Hills, the upscale part of Malibu, Robert was greeted by Vanessa, his wife, who was watching TV in the living room with an apathetic expression. Since Ethan's diagnosis, she had withdrawn into deep depression, taking less and less part in raising their son or their marriage. "You're home early," she remarked, not looking away from the screen. "There was an incident," Robert replied, as Margaret, head down, took Ethan to his room. "I fired Margaret." That finally got Vanessa's attention. "What? Why? You know how hard it is to find someone willing to care for a child with Ethan's special needs." Robert's chest tightened at how his wife avoided directly mentioning their son's condition, as if it were something shameful. She left Ethan alone on the boardwalk while she was on the phone. A street girl found him and was sharing her snack with him when I got there. Vanessa's eyes widened, finally showing some emotion. "My God, is he okay? That girl didn't do anything to him?" "On the contrary," Robert said, sitting beside his wife. "She was looking after him when everyone who was supposed to failed." The silence that followed was heavy, Vanessa knew his comment was aimed at her too, at how she had increasingly withdrawn from being a mother. "You don't understand, Robert. It's hard for me to see him like this. And how do you think it is for him, Vanessa, to have a mother who can barely look him in the eye?" She stood abruptly. "Don't judge." "Me! You spend all day in that office while I'm here, watching our son struggle to do things any normal child—" She cut herself off, covering her mouth as if she'd said something terrible. "Go on, Vanessa," Robert urged bitterly. "Any normal child would do effortlessly." "That's what you were going to say, wasn't it?" Tears streamed down Vanessa's face. "I didn't mean it like that. I love Ethan, you know I do." "Do I?" Robert stood as well. "Because these past few months, honestly, it hasn't seemed like it. What it seems like is that you've given up on him, on us." Just then, Margaret appeared in the doorway. "Excuse me, sir. Ethan's changed and settled in his room. May I leave?" Robert nodded. "Yes, Margaret. As I said, you'll receive full pay for the month, but don't come back tomorrow." When the nanny left, Vanessa stared at her husband. "So now what? Who's going to take care of Ethan while you're at work and I'm—" She didn't finish. "While you're drowning in self-pity," Robert finished, unable to hold back his frustration. "I don't know, Vanessa. Maybe it's time you stepped up as his mother for once." It was cruel, he knew. His wife's depression was real, a health issue like any other. But at that moment, after what he had witnessed, Robert's patience had run out. "You have no idea what I'm going through," murmured Vanessa, sitting back down. "You're right, I don't," agreed Robert, softening his tone slightly. "Because you won't let me in, Vanessa. You build walls around yourself, pushing me and your son away. How can I help if you won't let me?" Before the argument could continue, Robert's phone rang. It was Teresa, his company secretary. "Anderson," he answered, stepping away from his wife. "Mr. Anderson, we have a problem at the Torrance factory. The production manager said they need you there urgently." Robert sighed. His auto parts business, one of the largest in California, always seemed to have some emergency requiring his personal attention. "I'll be there in an hour," he replied before hanging up. He turned back to Vanessa, who remained seated, staring blankly. "I have to go to the factory. There's an issue I need to handle." "As always," she replied flatly. "Vanessa, please. Ethan needs a bath before bed and someone to read him a story. Can you do that?" She didn't respond immediately, but finally nodded. "I can try." It was the most Robert could hope for at that moment, and he knew it. He hurried upstairs to say goodbye to his son, finding him engrossed in his toy cars. "Daddy has to go, champ," he said, kissing his forehead. "Mummy's giving you your bath tonight, okay? Where's Jazz?" Tychust Ethan, looking toward the door as if expecting to see the girl. Robert smiled, surprised by the impact their brief encounter had on his son. "Jasmine went back to her home, buddy, but maybe we'll see her again someday. Tomorrow." "I don't know, champ, we'll see." That night, as he drove to the factory in Torrance, Robert couldn't shake the image of Jasmine sharing her sandwich with Ethan, a child in clear social distress, showing more empathy and responsibility than many adults he knew, including his own wife. The factory issue turned out to be less urgent than his secretary had implied, a cooling system failure already being repaired when he arrived. Still, Robert took the opportunity to check on production and speak with the night shift workers, something he hadn't done in a while. It was nearly midnight when he returned home to a silent, dark house. He went straight to Ethan's room and, to his surprise, found Vanessa asleep in the armchair beside his son's bed, an open children's book on her lap. It was the first time in months he'd seen her in the boys' room. The next day, Robert had to rearrange his schedule. With no nanny, he'd need to take Ethan to his afternoon physical therapy session himself. Vanessa, despite the small step forward the night before, claimed a severe migraine and stayed in her room. When they arrived at the Johnson Rehabilitation Center, Ethan seemed unusually excited. "Jazz, Jazz," he called, looking around as his father helped him walk with his walker down the hallway. Robert caught himself searching for the girl too, though he tried to convince himself he was just curious to see if she really worked there as she'd claimed. Melissa, Ethan's physical therapist, greeted them with her usual encouraging smile. "Hi, Ethan. Ready for our exercises today?" The boy grimaced. The sessions, though essential for his progress, were often painful and exhausting. "Jazz," he repeated, looking hopefully at the therapist. "Jazz?" Melissa asked, confused. "He met a girl yesterday," Robert explained. "Apparently she works here. Jasmine's her name, about 9 years old. Curly hair, tan skin." Melissa's face lit up with recognition. "Oh, Jazz. Yes, she helps with cleaning here some afternoons. An amazing girl, isn't she? Takes care of her grandma all by herself ever since her mother. Well, ever since she was left with just her grandma." "What happened to her mother?" asked Robert, growing increasingly intrigued by the child's story. Melissa lowered her voice so Ethan wouldn't hear. "She abandoned the family about 2 years ago. The father was never in the picture. The grandma was already sick before, but she got much worse after that. Jasmine practically took over the household ever since." "What about child services, social assistance? Doesn't anyone intervene?" The physical therapist sighed. "Her grandma, Mrs. Dorothy Wilson, has legal custody, and despite the hardships, Jasmine does well in school. There are no signs of abuse. Technically, there's no reason for intervention. Besides, the system is already overloaded with much more serious cases." Ethan began growing impatient, tugging his father's hand toward the therapy room. "Jazz," he insisted. "I'll see if she's here today," offered Melissa, smiling at the boy. "Sometimes she comes after school." The session began as usual, with stretching exercises that made Ethan whimper in discomfort. Robert always hated this part, feeling helpless watching his son struggle, even though he understood the necessity of the exercises. They were in the middle of a particularly difficult set when the door opened and Jasmine walked in, wearing a simple lab coat that was too big for her, probably donated by one of the clinic's staff. "Jazz!" Ethan exclaimed, his face instantly lighting up. The girl smiled, seeming genuinely happy to see the little boy. However, when she noticed Robert, her expression grew more reserved. "Good afternoon, Mr. Anderson," she greeted politely. "Hi, Jasmine. It's nice to see you here," he replied, surprised by the coincidence. "Ethan hasn't stopped asking about you." "Can I stay for a little while, Dr. Melissa?" the girl asked the physical therapist. "I've already finished cleaning the rooms down the hall." "Of course, Jazz. In fact, if you'd like to help, that would be great. Ethan seems to really like you." Jasmine walked over to the treatment table where Ethan lay, still resisting the exercises. "Hi, Ethan. It hurts, huh? But did you know? These exercises will help you get strong like a superhero." The boy stopped whimpering, looking at her with interest. "Superhero? That's right," Jasmine confirmed, sitting on a stool beside the table. "When I was little, I had to do physical therapy too. I fell off the hill and hurt my leg, and it hurt so bad. But you know what I did?" Ethan shook his head, completely engrossed in the story. "I imagined that each exercise gave me a different superpower," Jasmine continued, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "This one, for example," she pointed to the exercise Melissa was trying to do with Ethan, "gave me the power to jump, so high I could touch the clouds." Melissa, noticing the positive effect Jasmine was having on Ethan, followed her lead. "How about we try this superpower, Ethan? Let's see if we can make you jump all the way to the clouds." To Robert's astonishment, Ethan nodded and let the physical therapist continue the exercise, still grimacing in pain, but without crying or resisting like before. For the next hour, Jasmine stayed by Ethan's side, turning every painful exercise into a superhero adventure, telling stories and encouraging the boy in a way Robert had never managed. When the session ended, Ethan was exhausted but smiling, a rare sight after physical therapy. "You were amazing," Melissa praised, looking at Jasmine with clear admiration. "I've never seen Ethan so cooperative." "I just told a few stories," the girl replied with a shrug. Robert watched the scene, deeply impressed. He had spent small fortunes on child development specialists, psychologists, and alternative therapies, all to help Ethan better cope with the challenges of his condition. And there was Jasmine, a child who had likely never attended a psychological consultation in her life, connecting with his son in a way no one else had before. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. "I have to go, Doctor," said Jasmine, standing up. Mrs. Jenkins said I have 2 more rooms to clean before I leave. Of course, dear, and thank you so much for your help, replied Melissa, beginning to organize the equipment. Wait, Jasmine, called Robert while helping Ethan sit up. I'd like to talk to you. Do you have a minute? The girl glanced at the clock on the wall, visibly worried about her duties. Just a quick minute, Mr. Anderson. If I don't finish my work, I won't get paid for the full day. Robert felt a pang in his chest hearing that. A 9-year-old child concerned about her day's wages was something he never imagined witnessing. I'll be brief, he promised. I wanted to thank you for what you did today. Ethan has never responded so well to a physical therapy session before. Jasmine smiled shyly. He's a good kid. He deserves to be happy. I also wanted to make you an offer, Robert continued. Would you come with us to Ethan's physical therapy sessions? I'd pay you, of course, more than what you earn cleaning. The girl's eyes widened for a moment, but then she frowned, suspicious. Why? You don't even know me that well. Because you did something for my son that no professional has managed to do so far. And because, well, to be honest, we're without a nanny right now. Jasmine thought for a few seconds before answering. I can help with the sessions here at the clinic, but I can't be a nanny. I have to take care of my grandma when I'm not at school or here. I understand, Robert replied, a little disappointed but admiring the girl's dedication. How about just during the physical therapy afternoons, 3 times a week for 2 hours? I'll pay double what you make here. Jasmine's eyes sparkled briefly at the possibility, but she remained hesitant. I don't know, Mr. Anderson. Mrs. Jenkins needs me here. She was the one who got Grandma's medicine when we had no money. I can talk to her, Robert offered. I'm sure we can work something out. What do you think? All right. Jasmine finally agreed, extending her small hand to seal the deal, but on one condition. What? Robert asked, surprised by the child's seriousness. The money has to be for my real work, not charity. Charity hurts more than hunger, my grandma always says. Robert felt a lump in his throat as he shook the girl's hand. There was more dignity in that child than in many adults he knew. It's a deal, Jasmine. Fair business, not charity. As he helped Ethan back to the car, Robert thought about how he'd explain this arrangement to Vanessa. His wife, who could barely handle their own son, would likely not approve of having a street kid, as she would surely label Jasmine in their lives. But that was a problem for later. Right now, all that mattered was that, for the first time in a long while, Ethan seemed genuinely happy after a physical therapy session, and that, to Robert, was priceless. In the days that followed, Robert rearranged his schedule to personally take Ethan to his physical therapy sessions. He had hired a new nanny, an older and experienced woman named Catherine, but only for the times when he had to be at the office. To her surprise, Vanessa also started spending more time with their son, even if briefly. On Thursday, the day of the second physical therapy session of the week, Jasmine was already waiting for them at the clinic entrance. "Jazz!" exclaimed Ethan, nearly losing his balance on the walker in his excitement to see his friend. "Hi, Ethan," she greeted him warmly. "Ready to gain more superpowers today?" The boy nodded eagerly while Jasmine looked at Robert. "Good afternoon, Mr. Anderson. Mrs. Jenkins already knows about our arrangement. She said it's fine, as long as I still help on Mondays and Wednesdays." "Excellent," replied Robert, once again impressed by the girl's responsibility. "I also spoke with Dr. Melissa. She was very happy with the arrangement. That day's session was even better than the last." Ethan, inspired by Jasmine's stories, tackled exercises that would have made him cry before. Robert watched in fascination as the girl turned every challenge into an adventure, every painful movement into a step toward an imaginary victory. At the end, when Ethan had already been taken to the hydrotherapy room with Melissa, Robert took the chance to talk a little more with Jasmine. "How's your grandma?" The girl sighed, her cheerful expression shifting to one of concern. "Not too well. The new medicine is expensive, and her pension barely covers the ones she already takes." "I can help with that," Robert offered immediately. "No, Mr. Anderson," Jasmine refused firmly. "I already said I don't want charity, and Grandma is even prouder than I am." "It wouldn't be charity," he argued. "It'd be an advance for your excellent work with Ethan." Jasmine looked at him with wisdom beyond her years. You're a good person, Mr. Anderson, but we have to handle this our way. I'm working extra hours here at the clinic on Saturday. Mrs. Jenkins said there's a big cleaning job in the new office. Robert felt both frustrated and admiring. How could a child have developed such a strong sense of integrity and determination? Mr. Anderson, Jasmine continued hesitantly, can I ask you something? Of course. Why does Ethan use a walker? Was he born like that? Robert appreciated her straightforward question. Many people avoided asking about Ethan's condition, as if it was shameful or taboo. He has a condition called developmental hip dysplasia. It wasn't diagnosed at birth like it should have been, and by the time we found out, it had already caused other problems in his legs and spine. Robert paused, remembering the agonizing months of appointments and diagnoses. But with the right treatment, the doctors say he has a good chance of walking without the walker eventually. Jasmine nodded, processing the information. My cousin Tyler had something like that. Now he plays soccer with his friends at the field. He's not the fastest, but he runs a lot. That simple story ignited a hope in Robert that no medical prognosis had managed to. The natural way Jasmine spoke about the condition, without drama or pity, was refreshing. Thank you for telling me that, Jasmine. It's good to hear positive stories. The girl smiled. Ethan will make it. He's strong. He just doesn't know it yet. When he got home that afternoon, Robert found Vanessa organizing some clothes in Ethan's room, something she hadn't done in months. How was the session? She asked without looking up from her task. Surprisingly good, Robert answered, watching his wife carefully. Jasmine has a special way with Ethan. She turns physical therapy into an adventure. Vanessa stopped what she was doing and looked at her husband. That girl. Are you sure it's safe to let her get so close to our son? You barely know. Her, Robert. I know her well enough to see she has a huge heart, he defended. And most importantly, Ethan adores her. You should see how cooperative he is during therapy sessions when she's around. Vanessa went back to folding clothes, her discomfort obvious. I just think it's strange you trust some street kid so much. She's not a street kid, Vanessa, corrected Robert, keeping his irritation in check. She lives with her grandma, goes to school regularly and works to help at home. She shows more responsibility than most adults I know. Including me? Is that what you're implying? Robert sighed, immediately regretting his words. That's not what I meant. I'm just asking you to give her a chance for Ethan. Their son's name seemed to hit Vanessa like a punch to the gut. Her eyes welled up. I want what's best for him. You know that. I know, Robert replied, stepping closer to his wife and lightly touching her shoulder. And I believe Jasmine can help him in ways we haven't been able to so far. Vanessa didn't answer, but she didn't pull away from her husband's touch either, which Robert took as a small step forward. The following week, something unexpected happened. Ethan woke up with a high fever and a throat infection, keeping him from physical therapy. Worried that Jasmine might wait for them in vain, Robert asked his secretary to call the clinic and let her know. But when he got home that night, he found Catherine visibly flustered. Thank goodness you're here, the nanny said as soon as he walked in. There's a girl here insisting on seeing Ethan. She said you had plans at therapy. I wasn't going to let her in, but Mrs. Vanessa said it was okay. Robert's chest tightened. Jasmine had come to their house? How did she even know where they lived? Following Catherine to Ethan's room, Robert saw a scene he never expected. Vanessa sitting on the edge of their son's bed while Jasmine, perched on a nearby chair, enthusiastically read a storybook, giving each character a different voice. Ethan, still visibly weak from the fever, managed a faint smile, completely absorbed in the tale. Robert watched Vanessa, surprised to see her smiling slightly too, just as engaged as their son. Hi, Mr. Anderson, Jasmine greeted, briefly pausing her reading. Sorry for showing up unannounced. You didn't come to the clinic today and I got worried. How did you know where we lived? Robert asked, still confused. Your driver brought me once, Vanessa answered, surprising her husband. She came to the clinic looking for you, and James called to ask if he could bring her here. I told Mrs. Vanessa I could wait for you at the clinic tomorrow, but she insisted I come see Ethan. Today, Jasmine explained. Robert looked at his wife, unable to hide his astonishment. Vanessa gave a shy smile. I thought it would do Ethan good. He's been so down since he woke up sick." "And it did," Robert said, smiling gratefully at his wife. "It did a lot of good." Ethan coughed, and Jasmine immediately grabbed the water glass from the nightstand, carefully helping him drink. "Slowly, Ethan. Just a little at a time." The tenderness and care with which the girl treated his son moved Robert deeply. There was a naturalness to her actions, as if caring for others was as instinctive as breathing. Later, after Ethan had fallen asleep and Jasmine had left, politely declining Robert's offer of a ride, insisting the bus would drop her off close to home, Vanessa broke the silence in their bedroom. "She's not what I expected." Robert, checking emails on his tablet, looked up. "How so?" "Jasmine. When you talked about her, I pictured some sloppy, rude girl, maybe even opportunistic." Vanessa paused, thoughtful. "But she's special. There's something about her I can't quite explain." "I know," agreed Robert, relieved to finally share this feeling with someone. "That's what I felt from the first day, when I saw her sharing her snack with Ethan." "She told me about her sick grandma, and how she's been helping clean the clinic to pay for the medicine." "She told you?" Robert was surprised. Jasmine was usually private about her personal life. "Yes, while you were away. I asked about her family, and she spoke so naturally about the hardships, without self-pity, you know, as if it was just life as it is." Robert nodded, understanding exactly what his wife meant. "And then I realized," Vanessa continued, her voice trembling slightly, "how weak I've been. That 9-year-old girl faces more struggles in a single day than I have in my entire privileged life, and yet she smiles, tells stories, brings joy to Ethan." "Vanessa." "No, Robert. I need to say this." She took a deep breath before going on. "When Ethan was diagnosed, I lost myself. I sank into such deep sadness that I forgot how to be a mother, how to be a wife. I became so obsessed with what he couldn't do that I forgot to celebrate everything he can do." Robert moved closer to his wife, taking her hands in his. "You've been sick, Vanessa. Depression is an illness like any other. Don't blame yourself for it. But I want to get better, Robert. Today, seeing how Ethan responded to Jasmine's presence, how he smiled even while feeling sick, I realized how much I've missed." Tears streamed silently down Vanessa's face. "I want to be the mother he deserves again." That night, for the first time in months, Robert felt his family might heal. It was as if Jasmine, with her bright and simple presence, had brought a breath of hope into that long-suffering home. The next morning, Robert woke to the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. He went downstairs, still sleepy, and found Vanessa and Ethan having breakfast together, something that hadn't happened in ages. The boy looked much better, with hardly any sign of the fever from the day before. "Daddy!" Ethan exclaimed when he saw him. "Mommy made pancakes." "I see," Robert replied, smiling at the animal-shaped pancakes on his son's plate. Vanessa used to do this before Ethan's diagnosis, a morning tradition that had faded along with so many other things. "Good morning," Vanessa greeted him, with a hesitant but genuine smile. "Want some pancakes too?" "I'd love some." As they ate, Vanessa surprised Robert again. "I was thinking, since Ethan's feeling better, maybe we could go to physical therapy today, and afterward maybe invite Jasmine for ice cream with us. I think Ethan would like that." "Ice cream with Jazz," Ethan cheered. Robert studied his wife, trying to understand the sudden change. "Are you sure? Yesterday you seemed—" "Yesterday I was being foolish and judgmental," Vanessa cut in. "And after talking with Jasmine, I realized she's exactly what Ethan needs right now. Someone who sees beyond his condition, who treats him like any other child." "I'm surprised," Robert admitted, "but happy, very happy." That afternoon, after the physical therapy session, which once again went remarkably well thanks to Jasmine's presence, the Anderson family, accompanied by the girl, headed to the ice cream parlor near the clinic. Ethan was beaming, sitting in his adapted chair and studying the colorful menu with all the different flavors. Jasmine, however, seemed slightly uneasy. "What's wrong, Jasmine?" Vanessa asked, noticing her discomfort. "Don't you like ice cream?" "I do, Mrs. Vanessa. It's just, I've never been to a place like this before." The confession hit Robert and Vanessa like a punch to the gut. For them, taking Ethan out for ice cream was a routine thing, an activity so ordinary they didn't think twice about it. For Jasmine, it was a completely new experience. "Well, then this will be your first time," said Vanessa, forcing a cheerful tone to hide the sadness she felt. "And you can pick any flavor you want." Jasmine's eyes sparkled with possibilities as she carefully examined each option. "Can I really choose anyone?" "Anyone," Robert confirmed, "and if you want, you can even taste it before deciding." After a long deliberation, during which Ethan insisted she should pick chocolate, just like him, Jasmine finally settled on strawberry. When the server brought the ice creams, the look of pure happiness on the girl's face as she took her first spoonful was something Robert knew he'd never forget. "This is the best ice cream in the world," she declared, making Ethan laugh. "Better than mine?" the boy challenged, holding out his bowl for her to try. Hard to say," Jasmine replied after tasting it, putting on a serious judge's expression. "I think they're both the best." It was a simple but perfect afternoon. Ethan, energized by Jasmine's presence, was more talkative and lively than Robert had seen him in a long time. Vanessa, meanwhile, seemed lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. On the way back, Robert insisted on driving Jasmine home. "But it's far, Mr. Anderson," the girl protested, "and it's up a hill where a nice car like yours can't even go all the way." "Then we'll drop you off as close as possible and you can guide us from there," Vanessa suggested. "It's already getting dark, Jasmine. I don't like the idea of you taking the bus alone." "Finally," the girl agreed. As they moved away from the city's upscale areas and into the outskirts, the surroundings changed drastically. The luxurious buildings and well-kept homes gave way to simple, sometimes precarious structures. Jasmine directed them naturally, until they reached a point where the road became too steep and potholed for Robert's car to continue. "From here, just go up those stairs over there," she said, pointing to a long concrete staircase winding up the hill. "I live in the third alley past old Mr. Thompson's grocery store. We'll walk you up," Robert decided, surprising Vanessa and Jasmine. "You don't have to, Mr. Anderson," the girl insisted. "I'm used to it." "I know you are, but I'd like to meet your grandma. After all, you already know our whole family. It's time we returned the visit, don't you think?" Truthfully, Robert had another reason for wanting to see Jasmine's home. Ever since learning about the financial struggles she and her grandma faced, he'd decided to help somehow, but knowing Jasmine's pride, he understood he'd need to find a way she'd accept. Vanessa looked at her husband, understanding his intention. "Robert's right, and I'm sure your grandma must be curious about who you've been spending so much time with." "You won't like my house," Jasmine murmured, her head down. "It's very small and simple." "Jasmine," Robert said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder, "a house isn't measured by its size or decorations. It's measured by the love inside it, and I'm sure your house has plenty of love." The girl's eyes filled with tears, but she held them back and nodded. "Okay, but what about Ethan?" "I'll stay with him," Vanessa offered. "You two go ahead and we'll wait here in the car." Robert followed Jasmine up the stairs, watching as she climbed effortlessly, clearly familiar with the path. Unlike her, he was soon out of breath. The staircase seemed endless, and the setting sun made the climb even more challenging. Finally, they arrived at a narrow street where several modest houses were crowded side by side. Jasmine led him down an even narrower alley to a small blue-painted brick house, already a bit faded by time. "This is it," she said, opening a small iron gate. "Grandma should be in the kitchen at this hour." As they entered, Robert was struck by the impeccable cleanliness and order of the small space. Despite its simplicity and clearly old-worn furniture, everything was meticulously arranged. Family photos decorated the walls of the tiny living room, and a vase with wildflowers, likely picked by Jasmine, adorned the coffee table. An elderly woman with white hair and skin as dark as Jasmine's, though deeply lined with wrinkles, appeared in the kitchen doorway. Despite her fragile appearance and slow gait, there was a dignity and strength in her gaze that strongly reminded him of Jasmine. "Grandma, this is Robert, Ethan's father. The boy I told you I help with physical therapy," Jasmine introduced. The woman studied Robert from head to toe before extending her hand. "Dorothy Wilson," she said firmly. "My granddaughter talks a lot about your boy. Seems they get along well." "Very well, actually," Robert agreed, shaking Mrs. Jenkins' hand respectfully. "Ethan adores your granddaughter, and so do we." The sincerity in Robert's voice seemed to soften the old woman's initial wariness. "Come in, sit down. We don't have much comfort to offer, but there's always coffee." Robert accepted the invitation, sitting in the simple armchair in the small living room while Jasmine went to help her grandmother prepare the coffee. Looking around, he could see how well kept the house was, despite its obvious space and resource limitations. In one corner, he spotted a small desk with school books neatly arranged, clearly Jasmine's study area. Soon, the girl returned with 2 cups of coffee and a shy smile. "Grandma told me to serve while she takes her medicine." "Thank you," Robert said, accepting the cup and watching Jasmine carefully. "You take good care of your grandma, don't you?" The girl shrugged as if it were nothing special. "Someone has to, and she's always taken care of me." "And your mother?" Robert asked, trying to understand the family situation better. Jasmine's expression closed off slightly. "She left. Said she'd come back, but it's been almost 2 years now." Before Robert could ask more, Mrs. Jenkins returned to the living room, walking slowly and carefully, sitting on the couch. "Jasmine, go get your uniform ready for tomorrow. It's almost bedtime," the woman instructed. "But Grandma, we have company. And that's exactly why you need to let me talk to Robert alone." Jasmine glanced between them, clearly reluctant, but obeyed, though not without casting a worried look at her grandmother first. When the girl left, Mrs. Jenkins turned to Robert. "You didn't come here just to see our house, did you?" The old woman's sharpness didn't surprise Robert. It was clear where Jasmine had gotten her intelligence. "No, I didn't," he admitted. "I came because I want to help you both, but I know Jasmine is too proud to accept." Mrs. Jenkins smiled faintly. "She gets that from me. In our family, we work hard for what we have, Robert. Charity hurts more than hunger," Robert finished. "She told me." The old woman nodded approvingly. "And if it's not charity, what are you proposing? A real job for Jasmine? My son needs her. I've never seen him so well, so motivated, since she came into our lives." Robert paused, gathering his thoughts. "I want to officially hire her to assist with his physical therapy sessions 3 times a week, with a proper contract, as soon as she's legally old enough. Until then, I can pay her as a youth apprentice, all within the law." "And what about her school?" "Of course you'll continue your studies as usual. The work would only be in the afternoons when Ethan has physical therapy." Mrs. Dorothy studied Robert for a long moment before answering. "You know you could hire dozens of qualified professionals to help your son, don't you?" "Why my granddaughter?" Robert thought before responding. "Because she has something no professional with years of study has been able to offer, a genuine connection with Ethan. She sees him as a normal child, not as a problem to be solved." He paused. "And, to be honest, it's not just Ethan. Who's being helped? My wife, who had been in deep depression since our son's diagnosis, started improving after Jasmine came into our lives. And I myself am learning from your granddaughter to value what truly matters." The answer seemed to satisfy Mrs. Dorothy, who nodded slowly. "The problem, Mr. Anderson, is that Jasmine can't just leave her job at the clinic. The money she earns there helps pay for my medicine, and my pension barely covers rent and food." It was the opening Robert had been waiting for. "I completely understand, Mrs. Dorothy. That's why, in addition to paying Jasmine, I'd like to offer health insurance for both of you. As part of the benefits package, of course." The elderly woman's eyes widened for a moment before she could contain her surprise. That would be more than I could have hoped for, Mr. Anderson. But I don't want to be a burden to you." "It's not a burden, Mrs. Dorothy. It's an investment." Robert smiled. "In the well-being of the person helping my son have a happier, more normal childhood." After some more conversation, where practical details were discussed and adjusted, Robert said goodbye, promising to return with all the necessary paperwork the next day. As he walked down the hill, he found Vanessa and Ethan asleep in the car, exhausted from the long day. The agreement sealed that night would forever change not only Jasmine and her grandmother's lives, but also the Anderson families. In the weeks that followed, a new routine took shape. Jasmine accompanied Ethan to every physical therapy session, turning what had once been torment into something almost fun for the boy. On weekends, Robert or Vanessa would occasionally pick up the girl and her grandmother to spend the day with them, sharing meals and leisure time the family had rarely enjoyed before. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Mrs. Dorothy, thanks to the health insurance, began proper treatment for her heart problems, gaining new energy. Vanessa, inspired by the elderly woman's strength and Jasmine's contagious joy, sought professional help for her depression, starting therapy and medication. Ethan, the biggest beneficiary of that unexpected friendship, made surprising progress in physical therapy. 2 months after the arrangement began, during a particularly challenging session, what Robert and Vanessa had long hoped for happened. The boy took his first steps without the walker. "Look, Jazz, look!" Ethan exclaimed, taking 3 wobbly steps toward his friend, who waited with open arms. "You did it!" Jasmine cheered, hugging him as he finally reached her, stumbling. "I knew you could do it. You're the strongest superhero I know." Melissa, the physical therapist, fought back tears, while Robert and Vanessa, watching through the window, embraced each other, overcome with emotion. "It was her, wasn't it?" Vanessa whispered to her husband. "It was Jasmine who gave him the confidence he needed." Robert nodded, unable to speak from the emotion overwhelming him. At that moment he realized that the money he had invested in his company, the long hours of work, the sacrifices he had made over the years to build his wealth, none of it, compared to the value of what that little girl, just 9 years old, had brought to his family. At home that evening, Ethan couldn't stop talking about how he had walked all by himself and how Jazz had said he'd soon be running like a leopard. Vanessa, revitalized by her son's progress, prepared a special dinner to celebrate. "We should invite Jasmine and Mrs. Dorothy for a special lunch on Sunday," Vanessa suggested, "to celebrate this victory." "Excellent idea," agreed Robert. "Ethan would love that. And I think we would too." But on Sunday, to the couple's surprise, only Mrs. Dorothy showed up at their door, looking worried. "Jasmine woke up with a high fever and a sore throat," the elderly woman explained. "She insisted I come to let you know she wouldn't be able to see Ethan today, but I didn't want to leave her alone." "Absolutely not," Vanessa exclaimed. "Let's take her to a doctor right away. Why didn't you call us?" "She didn't want to bother you," Mrs. Dorothy replied. "Said it was just a cold, but I'm worried. The fever is very high." Without a second thought, Robert grabbed the car keys. "We'll go pick up Jasmine right now and take her to the hospital." What they found when they arrived at the girl's home broke Robert's heart. Jasmine was lying in her small bed, visibly weakened by the fever, yet she still tried to sit up when she saw them. "I'm fine," she insisted, though her flushed face and fever-bright eyes said otherwise. "I just need a little rest." "No way," Robert said, stepping closer and touching her hot forehead. "You need a doctor, Jasmine. And don't worry, it's all covered by the insurance." At the private hospital where they took her, the doctors diagnosed severe tonsillitis, requiring hospitalization for intravenous antibiotics. "I don't want to stay in the hospital," Jasmine protested when the doctor left the room. "Grandma will be alone." "Your grandmother can stay at our house while you recover," Vanessa offered immediately. "We have a guest room we hardly ever use, and that way Ethan can visit you every day after school." "But—" "No buts, young lady," Mrs. Dorothy interrupted firmly. "You need to take care of yourself. You always tell me that, don't you? Now it's your turn to hear the same advice." Reluctantly, Jasmine agreed to stay hospitalized. Over the next 3 days, she received constant visits from Ethan, who insisted on showing her every day how much better he was getting at walking without his walker. "When you get better, I'll show you how I can walk all the way to the garden by myself," he promised, holding his friend's hand. On the 4th day, now recovered and ready to be discharged, Jasmine received an unexpected visitor, Christine Brooks, the social worker responsible for the area where she lived. "I heard you were admitted to a private hospital." The social worker said, observing Jasmine with a neutral expression. Can you explain how that happened? Jasmine told her about her work with Ethan and how the Anderson family had arranged medical insurance for her and her grandmother. The social worker listened carefully, taking notes. And this work, is it formal? How much do you get paid? How many hours a week? The questions continued, growing increasingly specific and skeptical. When Robert arrived to visit Jasmine, he found the girl visibly upset. Good morning, he greeted, noticing the unfamiliar woman's presence. Can I help you? Christine Brooks, social worker. The woman introduced herself, extending her hand to Robert. I'm investigating Jasmine's situation. I've received information that she may be exploited. Exploited? Robert repeated, shocked. That's absurd. Jasmine works with us legally, with all the protections of the youth apprentice. Law. We even have court authorization. Yes, and it's quite curious how that authorization was obtained so quickly, Mr. Anderson. Robert Anderson. Recognition flashed in the social worker's eyes. Ah, of course, the owner of Anderson Auto Parts. Now I understand the speed in the paperwork. The tone hinted at something improper, and Robert felt anger rising. Inside him, what exactly are you suggesting, Ms. Brooks? I'm just doing my job, Mr. Anderson. We have to ensure vulnerable children aren't exploited, even, she emphasized the word, by well-meaning and influential people. Before Robert could respond, Jasmine intervened. Ms. Christine, Mr. Robert and Mrs. Vanessa never exploited me. They treat me really well, pay me fairly, and even gave health insurance for me and my grandma. Ethan needs me, and I really care about him. The social worker's expression softened slightly at the girl's passionate defense, but she still seemed wary. I understand your feelings, Jasmine, but I also need to make sure your rights are being respected. Turning to Robert, I'll need copies of all documents related to Jasmine's employment, as well as periodic visits to verify conditions. That's not a problem, Robert replied, controlling his irritation. All the documents are in order, and you'll always be welcome in our home. When the social worker left, Jasmine looked at Robert with concern. I'm sorry, Mr. Robert. I didn't mean to cause trouble. You didn't cause any trouble, Jasmine, he assured her, sitting beside her bed. Ms. Brooks is just doing her job, and that's a good thing, you know. It means there are people looking out for your well-being. But she looked at you and Mrs. Vanessa like you were bad people. Robert smiled, touched by the girl's worry. Don't dwell on it. Once she gets to know our family better and sees how we treat you, I'm sure she'll change her mind. However, in the months that followed, the social worker became a constant presence in Jasmine's life, and by extension, the Anderson family's. Surprise visits, interviews with Ethan, Vanessa, Mrs. Dorothy, and even investigations into Robert's past became routine. Ironically, it was through one of these investigations that the social worker discovered something that would change her perception of Robert. An old local newspaper article, dated 20 years earlier, told the story of a 17-year-old boy who had lost his mother to an untreated heart condition due to lack of resources. The boy, who worked as an office assistant at a metalworks factory, had sworn that one day he would build an empire and help people facing similar struggles. The boy's name, Robert Anderson. During a particularly tense visit, after nearly 3 months of investigation, Christine confronted Robert with the article. Why did you never mention this? She asked, placing the yellowed clipping on the Andersons' living room table. That you yourself came from a situation similar to Jasmine's? Robert looked at the faded paper, painful memories resurfacing. I didn't think it was relevant. What matters is the present, not the past. It is relevant, Mr. Anderson, Christine insisted. It helps explain your genuine interest in Jasmine. You see yourself in her, don't you? Robert took a deep breath before answering. Maybe, or maybe I see my mother in her grandma, struggling alone to raise a child, without the means to treat an illness that, with proper care, wouldn't have been fatal. He paused, steadying his emotions. When I found Jasmine that day sharing her only sandwich with my son, something inside me woke up. A memory, perhaps, of how kindness can exist even in the most difficult circumstances. The social worker studied Robert for a long moment. You know, I spent these months looking for signs that you might somehow be exploiting Jasmine, using your influence to get cheap labor, or maybe even something more sinister. She sighed, but all I found was a family that genuinely cares for an extraordinary girl. It's because we truly care, Robert replied simply. Jasmine changed our lives as much as I hope we've changed hers. That conversation marked a turning point in the relationship between the Anderson family and the social worker. In subsequent visits, Christine even brought small gifts for Ethan and Jasmine, and the initial tension was gradually replaced by mutual respect. A year after the fateful encounter on the Venice Beach boardwalk, Ethan was already walking almost without support. He only used a small cane for longer distances. Progress the doctors attributed both to consistent physical therapy and the positive psychological encouragement Jasmine provided. Jasmine herself had flourished during this time. With the financial stability provided by her formal work with the Anderson family and with her grandma receiving proper treatment, the girl could focus more on her studies. Her teachers quickly noticed her extraordinary potential, especially in math and science. Vanessa, recovered from depression, returned to teaching literature at the local university, something she had given up when Ethan was born. Robert, in turn, reorganized his professional life, delegating more responsibilities and spending more time with his family. On Jasmine's 10th birthday, the Anderson family threw a surprise party for the girl who had never celebrated a birthday with a real party before. It was an indescribable joy to see the house decorated, a huge cake with her name and carefully chosen gifts. There's one more surprise, Robert announced after Jasmine had opened all her presents. This one is from all of us. He handed her an envelope, which she opened curiously. Inside was an enrollment certificate for one of the city's most prestigious schools. A full scholarship, Vanessa explained, seeing the confusion on Jasmine's face. For when you start 6th grade. The principal was extremely impressed with your grades. Jasmine looked from the certificate to Robert and Vanessa, then to Ethan, who was grinning widely beside her. I don't know what to say, she murmured, tears welling in her eyes. Say you accept, Robert suggested. You deserve every opportunity life can offer, Jasmine. Mrs. Dorothy, seated in a comfortable chair specially brought in for her, watched the scene with misty eyes. Just see my granddaughter? I always said education would open doors for you. Then, to everyone's surprise, Ethan stood up from the couch and, without using his cane, walked over to Jasmine and hugged her. Congrats, Jazz, he said, perfectly balanced. It was the first time Ethan had walked completely unaided in front of everyone. The moment couldn't have been more symbolic. The boy who once seemed doomed to rely forever on a walker was now moving freely, thanks in large part to the positive influence of a girl life had placed in his path by chance. Or perhaps, as Robert was beginning to believe, not entirely by chance. The following week, while Jasmine helped Ethan with one of his now less frequent physical therapy sessions, Robert received an unexpected phone call. It was Christine Brooks, the social worker. Mr. Anderson, we need to talk urgently. It's about Mrs. Dorothy. The social worker's grave tone immediately set off an alarm in Robert. Did something happen? It's better we talk in person. Can I come to your office this afternoon? 2 hours later, Christine Brooks was sitting across from Robert at the headquarters of Anderson Auto Parts. Mrs. Dorothy suffered a minor stroke last night, the social worker explained bluntly. She's stable, but this incident has raised some important legal questions. What kind of questions? Robert asked, already dreading the answer. While reviewing Mrs. Dorothy's paperwork to ensure she receives all available benefits, we discovered she doesn't have legal custody of Jasmine. What do you mean? She always said that she believed she did. Apparently, after Jasmine's mother abandoned her, there was an informal custody transfer, but the paperwork was never properly finalized. Christine sighed. Legally, custody still belongs to the mother, who's been missing for nearly 3 years. Robert felt a weight in his stomach. What does this mean for Jasmine? It means that with Mrs. Dorothy hospitalized, technically, Jasmine is in a state of abandonment. The law requires her to be placed in temporary foster care while we try to locate her mother or settle the custody issue. Foster care? That's ridiculous. Robert stood up, unable to contain his outrage. "Jasmine has a family who loves her. She has Mrs. Dorothy, she has us." "I agree the situation is unfair," Christine said calmly. "That's why I came to you first, unofficially. There's an alternative." "What?" "Temporary custody. You and your wife could apply to take Jasmine in while Mrs. Dorothy recovers and we sort out the legalities. Given your history with her and the circumstances, I believe a judge would approve it." Robert didn't hesitate for a second. "What do we need to do? What paperwork? How long will it take?" The social worker smiled slightly. "I knew that would be your response. I've already gathered all the necessary forms." She placed a folder on the desk. "As for timing, it usually takes weeks, but I know the family court judge on duty. Today. If we submit the request by this afternoon, she might review it before the day ends." Robert looked at Christine with gratitude and newfound understanding. "You really care about Jasmine, don't you?" "I care about all the children under my care, Mr. Anderson. But Jasmine, she's special. She deserves stability in her life." That same afternoon, after a call to Vanessa explaining the situation and receiving her enthusiastic support, Robert and Christine submitted the temporary custody request. The judge, moved by the story and the urgency, granted the Andersons custody for 6 months, the expected recovery time for Mrs. Dorothy, and the period needed to finalize the legal arrangements. The news that she would stay temporarily with the Andersons left Jasmine with mixed feelings. She was worried about her grandma, but also relieved she wouldn't be sent to foster care. Ethan, on the other hand, was absolutely thrilled at the idea of having his big sister live with them. In the weeks that followed, a new dynamic settled in the Anderson household. Jasmine, initially shy and careful not to intrude, soon became an integral part of the family. She visited her grandma at the hospital daily, always accompanied by Robert or Vanessa, and threw herself into her studies with even more determination, motivated by the prospect of a new school. Mrs. Dorothy recovered slowly but remained frail. The doctors recommended constant care after discharge, something hard to provide in her isolated hillside home. It was Vanessa who suggested the solution. "What if we renovated the guest house in the backyard?" she proposed during a family dinner. "It has a bedroom, bathroom, and a small living area. It would be perfect for Mrs. Dorothy to stay close to us, but still have her privacy." The idea was met with enthusiasm by everyone, especially Jasmine, who saw it as a way to keep her grandma nearby while staying close to the family she had learned to love. When they presented the plan to Mrs. Dorothy during a visit to the hospital, the elderly woman initially resisted. "I've already caused you too much trouble," she protested weakly. "I don't want to be a burden." "You will never be a burden, Mrs. Dorothy," Vanessa assured her, holding the older woman's hand. "Besides, Jasmine needs you, we all do." "It's true, Grandma," added Jasmine. "Ethan is learning to play checkers, and I told him you're the best player I know." The mention of checkers, an old passion of Mrs. Dorothy's, brought a sparkle to her eyes. "Well, someone has to teach the boy the rules properly," she murmured, a small smile playing on her lips. The renovation of the guest house was completed in record time, thanks to the efficiency of the crews hired by Robert. The space was adapted to Mrs. Dorothy's specific needs, with support rails, ramps instead of steps, and an emergency alarm system connected to the main house. When the day of her hospital discharge finally arrived, Jasmine could hardly contain her excitement as she showed her grandmother her new home. "Look, Grandma, there's even a little garden out back. Mrs. Vanessa said you can plant all the herbs you want just like you did back home." Mrs. Dorothy looked around with visible emotion, her wrinkled hands gently touching the simple but quality furniture, the lightweight fabric curtains, and the family photos Jasmine had carefully framed and hung on the walls. "It's beautiful, my dear," she murmured. "More than I ever dreamed of having." Ethan, who had insisted on helping prepare the space for Mrs. Dorothy's arrival, appeared at the door carefully carrying a checkerboard. "Hi, Mrs. Dorothy," he greeted her, now walking steadily without any support. "I brought the game Jazz said you like. Can we play after you rest?" The warm smile the older woman gave the boy was answer enough. That evening, gathered for a celebration dinner in honor of Mrs. Dorothy's recovery, Robert looked around the table and felt such a wave of gratitude that he had to make an effort not to show his emotions. His family, once fragmented by pain and emotional distance, was now united and stronger. Ethan, whose future had seemed so uncertain just a year ago, was now walking, laughing, and making plans like any child his age. Vanessa had regained her joy for life, returning to teaching and taking an active role in raising their son. And now they had been blessed with the presence of Jasmine and Mrs. Dorothy, who had brought with them lessons of resilience, dignity, and unconditional love. All because on that fateful day on the Venice Beach boardwalk, a 9-year-old girl had decided to share her only sandwich with a little boy she didn't know, who was leaning on a walker. "What are you thinking about?" Vanessa asked softly, noticing her husband's distant gaze. Robert smiled, meeting his wife's eyes. "About how life can change completely because of one small act of kindness." 5 years had passed since that first meeting on the boardwalk. Ethan, now 7, not only walked normally, but also took swimming lessons at school, something doctors had once thought unlikely. Jasmine, at 14, stood out as one of the top students in her school, especially in science and math, and already talked about studying biomedical engineering in the future, inspired by her experience with Ethan. Mrs. Dorothy, though still facing some health challenges due to her advanced age, had become a beloved presence, not just for the family but for the entire neighborhood, with her life stories and wise advice. The small vegetable garden behind the guest house had expanded into an impressive herb garden, which she lovingly tended and generously shared. Vanessa had published her first book, a collection of short stories inspired by her family's experiences, which quickly became a hit with readers and critics alike. Robert, meanwhile, had transformed his business by creating an apprenticeship program for underprivileged youth, directly inspired by his experience with Jasmine. Social worker Christine Brooks, now a close family friend, often cited Jasmine and the Andersons' case as an example of how well-executed social interventions could change lives. One Saturday morning, as the family prepared for a picnic in the park, the phone rang. It was from family court. After years of unsuccessful searches for Jasmine's birth mother, the judge had finally decided to grant the Andersons full adoption rights, with Mrs. Dorothy's enthusiastic approval. When Robert, overcome with emotion, shared the news with everyone, Jasmine fell silent for a long moment, processing the meaning of those words. "Does this mean I'm officially your daughter now?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You've always been our daughter, Jasmine," Vanessa replied, hugging her tightly. "The papers just make official what we've always felt in our hearts." Ethan, who had overheard the conversation, approached with a huge grin. "So does this mean you're officially my sister now? Can I introduce you that way at school?" Jasmine smiled through her tears, hugging the boy who had changed her life as much as she had changed his. "Yes, Ethan. Now I'm officially your big sister." Mrs. Dorothy, watching the scene with misty eyes, made the sign of the cross. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," she murmured. "Who would have thought that shared sandwich would bind our lives together forever?" Robert, his heart overflowing with gratitude, looked at the family fate had given him in such an unexpected way. A wife who had found her strength again, a son who overcame every obstacle, a daughter who brought light wherever she went, and a wise matriarch who kept them grounded in humility and gratitude. "You know what I sometimes think?" he said as he helped Ethan tie his shoes for the outing. "That day on the boardwalk, it wasn't just Jasmine who found Ethan. It was all of us finding each other, exactly when we needed one another most. And so, bound by love and gratitude, the family that began with a simple act of kindness continued on their path, transforming not only their own lives, but also those of everyone lucky enough to cross it." The end. Dear listeners, what did you think of this heartwarming journey? If Jasmine and Ethan's story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Share in the comments if you've ever witnessed how a small gesture can change entire lives. Thank you for joining us in this story of resilience and love.